Fiona is here. Being the second ultra unit in the game, she is extremely versatile and fits into many team comps. As such, there's quite a bit of analysis to go through. We'll start with her kit, then move on to advancements and matrices. In a separate video, we'll look at team comps and rotations, and finally, comparisons. Let's start out with Fiona's trait, as it is integral to her skills. Her trait grants a persistent 18% damage buff with no conditions, and then enhances the effects of all her skills. As such, there is pretty much no reason ever to not use it, even when not using Fiona herself. I'll mention these enhancements as I talk about each skill, but here's an overview for now. Fiona's basic skill is Crashing Falls. By itself, this just deals a small amount of damage with no other effects. However, Fiona's unique mechanic is that she gets to equip 2 sub-skills, which the game refers to as Scatter Techniques. She has 7 of these sub-skills to pick from. The first sub-skill you pick is added to Crashing Falls. That is, when using her base skill, it'll apply all the effects and damage of the first sub-skill while taking on the cooldown of that skill. The second sub-skill is added to a separate hotkey, which you can execute on any weapon. These are all instant to cast, but do not count towards on-skill effects, such as stacking Saki's A1. Her first scatter technique is Hydro Focus, which deals damage and applies an all-elemental buff. This has a low cooldown, so the buff is pretty much permanent. Despite being called an all-elemental buff, this functions as a unique multiplier. With her trait, the buff effect is doubled. Next, we have Vortex. This is her highest damage sub-skill, and has a fairly low cooldown. The damage dealt from this skill counts as both skill and discharge damage, meaning it benefits from both multipliers. With her trait active, this deals increased damage when Fiona is on the field. Her third scatter technique is Torrential Force. This grants a 35-second buff that increases skill damage, while also granting 60 weapon charge a second. Furthermore, casting this skill counts as a discharge, benefiting characters such as Icarus and A6 Lin. When casting Fiona's discharge, the cooldown of this skill is reset. When Fiona's trait is active, this also gives a similar buff to discharge damage. Maelstrom grants a slowly ramping damage buff that reaches its maximum strength after 10 seconds, has infinite duration, but is instantly lost upon switching weapons. With Fiona's trait, the damage buff is increased when using physical weapons. Aqua Shackles creates a prison on the target for 3 seconds, completely freezing them in place. It also reduces the resistance of the target by 8% for 15 seconds, doubled underwater. This resistance reduction stacks additively with other resistance shredding sources. With Fiona's trait, the resistance reduction is increased slightly, and the prison duration is increased to 5 seconds with Benediction resonance. Lastly, Wellspring grants an all-elemental damage buff based on your max health, 1% per 100,000 health, up to 9% in total. Additionally, if you have over 1.6 mil health, you'll gain an extra 7% buff. This all-elemental damage buff is also a unique multiplier that is separate from matrices and the like. With Fiona's trait and Fortitude Resonance, it will additionally increase resistance by a portion of your max HP, up to 10%. That was a lot of skills. Here's an overview TLDR explanation of each. Hydro Focus is a general purpose buff, great in most teams. Vortex is a high damage skill, but pretty much only used in ultra DPS teams. Torrential Force is amazing in any team that focuses on skill damage, with extra synergy in Icarus and A6 Lin teams. Maelstrom needs time to ramp up, and is only really usable in teams where you stay on one weapon for an extended amount of time. It is pretty much made for Umi. Aqua Shackles is a great support skill. Wells Ring is a good secondary buff to take if nothing else fits. The other unique part of her kit is her linking mechanic, which is exclusive to Benediction Resonance. Hold your attack key to link to a teammate, granting them 50% of your personal healing, and additional buffs depending on their combat resonance. Note that each player can only link to or be linked from one player at a time. If they have attack or balanced resonance, you transfer 20% of your attack to them, up to 20,000. If they have fortitude resonance, you transfer 50% of your resistance to them. Lastly, if they have benediction resonance, both of you will heal for 30% more. Fiona's discharge restores you health proportional to your attack, clears some green bite points, and grants you a short period of delay immunity. It also triggers an additional effect based on your combat resonance. With attack or balance resonance, you'll gain 15% attack for 30 seconds. With fortitude, you'll gain a stacking resistance buff. Additionally, if you fall under 30% health, you gain 40% damage reduction for 5 seconds. Finally, with Benediction, you grant your allies a buff, which blocks the next instance of damage within the next 10 seconds. Each subsequent cast of the discharge will also increase the healing by 20%, up to 40% in total, with the stacking effect lasting 30 seconds. Fiona's basic skills aren't too much to write home about, and deal fairly mediocre damage compared to other weapons, but they all do more than Lin, so if you must DPS on an Ultra weapon, use Fiona over Lin. Her dodge also applies a good amount of AoE healing to teammates, over double the amount of Nemesis' dodge. It also clears some green bite points. Now that we're familiar with Fiona's kit, let's move on to her advancements. All of Fiona's advancements have super generic value, so the gains that will be listed will be fairly accurate to all teams. First, let's cover an important topic. How does Fiona compare to Lin? And at what advancement does an A6 Lin get replaced by Fiona? Here's a table of all the elements. The middle line here represents A6 Lin. The horizontal meter represents the power of Fiona, with the left side being A0 and the right side being A6. This is fairly consistent for all the comps. Fiona A0 is a downgrade from A6 Lin, but only by a small amount. A6 Fiona is a sizable increase, around 25% more, not even including the execute. Her A1 grants you a new crystal every time you cast a skill or discharge, up to 5 in total. The crystal count decays by 1 every 6 seconds, but obtaining a new crystal will refresh the timer. You gain a 4 to 12% damage buff and a 6 to 18% healing buff based on the amount of crystals you have. This damage buff is a unique multiplier. Depending on your team comp, you may have trouble maintaining 5 crystals, especially in comps like Physical, which have a low skill cast frequency, and as such, you don't really reach the maximum value here on average. Her A3 instantly executes enemies below a certain threshold of HP when using Moonstar Bracelet. This execution threshold is a function of your crystal count, maxing out at 12% for Benediction Resonance, or 7% for others. Because only one execution is needed per party, the gain from execution is kept separate from the TPM calculation, and as such, A3 only has the base value of stat increases in it otherwise. At A5, you gain 1 additional elemental crystal per scatter technique used, meaning Fiona's base skill will now grant 2. Additionally, the decay rate is slowed from 6 seconds to 20 seconds. You can also block 1 hit of fatal damage by using 3 crystals, which has a low cooldown of 25 seconds. This makes it even easier to maintain crystals, though this doesn't raise the bar by too much. This advancement is mainly just for the utility. A6 increases the value of the crystal damage buff from 4 to 12% to 14 to 28%. Note that this replaces the A1 buff, and is not an extra multiplier added on top. Fiona's A6 adds a considerable amount of damage, though essentially all the raw power of her advancements is baked into the A1 and A6, with the A3 having a nice execute for solo content. In group content, only one person needs to have A3 to reap the benefit of it. How do these advancements compare to her matrices? Let's take a look. Fiona's matrix is similar to Lynn's. The 2-piece buffs your attack for a period of time, and while this buff does work in the offhand, you need to have it on field to apply it. The 4-piece buffs your final damage when using a scatter technique. When you have Benediction resonance active, it increases it by a smaller amount but for your whole team. Additionally, it increases final damage based on your base attack, up to 5%. Now, how worth it is it to pick up? Let's take a quick look in every team. Note that the values shown in the following graphs are only the standalone values. Check the icon next to each matrix to see the stacking type. Multiple matrices of the same type will stack additively with one another, giving you less of a relative benefit for having both. For more information, check out my last video. In an altered team, Fiona's matrix is very strong. Lon's matrix is a viable choice alongside Lynn, but the soon accessible Claudia matrix is the keystone of this team. Its massive discharge bonus, while additive to Lynn 4-piece, greatly benefits the damage of Vortex. In a flame team, Fiona's matrix is a lot stronger than its final damage competitor, Annabella. However, in typical team comps, you end up running both for now anyway. If you are a lower spender, a 0 Fiona matrix almost matches a 3 of the other matrices. For Frost, Fiona's matrix offers an upgrade over Alice, who also covers the final damage category. If you already have these final damage matrices and do not have Icarus's, though, it's probably worth picking those up instead. Both submitted matrices are very strong, but Fiona's are still stronger. Fenrir's matrices are the competing final damage matrices in this case, but half of the effect of her matrices are critical damage, so the dilution effect of stacking final damage isn't as pronounced as in other teams. As such, it doesn't hurt too much to run Fenrir, Tian, and Fiona. World Boss matrices in this team can be a bit stronger than 0-star Fiona when used on Fenrir, however, as Fenrir can benefit a lot from the on-field bonus. In a physical team, we have a very strange situation. While Umi's matrix is powerful for boosting final damage, Fiona does the job better and also provides a much-needed attack boost, as physical has none otherwise. If you already have Umi's matrix, however, it may be worth waiting for Genono's, as Genono's matrix will be a unique category that physical does not have access to right now, outside of Scylla matrices. Lyra's matrix is still essential for endgame physical teams due to the massive on-field bonus it gives. Finally, let's compare the team buffing capabilities of Fiona's matrix to competing options. Zero's matrix grants up to a 28% unique multiplier to all shielded teammates when on-fielding the holder's weapon, and is considered the strongest support matrix currently, to a point where some endgame supports will carry 2 sets of them to maintain the uptime when switching weapons. Coco's matrix offers an attack buff, but the duration of this is very short, only 6 seconds, and working on-field only. While the value of Fiona's buff may be less than Coco's typically, it works completely off-field and will be up much more often. You really can't go wrong though with one set of each of Zero, Coco, and Fiona, where you can then have the opportunity to buff your teammates with all 3 at once for huge burst windows. In summary, Fiona matrices are strong all around, but if you already have one of the limited sets that boosts final damage and intend on using both that and Fiona's matrices, you won't get as much value out of them. Fiona is pretty powerful to pull for in both her character and matrices, even at lower investment. I'll see you guys in the part 2 video then, to cover the rest of the topics.